After one of the most shocking playoff efforts from the Montreal Canadiens we've seen in quite some time, and the inability to close out in Game 6, we're headed to Western New York for a deciding Game 7 with the Canadiens season on the line.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Locked On Canadiens. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as that Maybe It's Ian. Let's not sugarcoat it, folks. We have no idea what just happened with the Montreal Canadiens in Game 6. I was going to record a bonus episode after that and decided it was not the best use of my time, considering I was absolutely shocked by what took place. That episode would have provided little to no value to anyone coming out of that game. There was nothing to be discussed. There was nothing that could have made sense. I've tried to compartmentalize my thoughts a little bit. We'll talk about what happened in Game 6. I want to talk about the Bell Center as sort of the narrative has flipped that the Canadiens can't win there, and it's because of what the Bell Center brings. I think there's some nuance involved in that conversation. I want to talk about that. And then look, it's all on the table. It's Game 7. It's Montreal. It's Buffalo. One of these teams, their season is going to end on Monday night tonight, as you're listening to this, and the other will be headed to the Eastern Conference Final. It's a pick'em as far as I'm concerned. These teams have traded punches, but we'll get to the Game 7 edge aspect of this when we get there. Game 6, Montreal loses by a score of 8-3. And a lot of times when the Canadiens have given up that many goals in the past, which we've seen quite a bit in this rebuild, both in they are in the middle of the rebuild, they're not supposed to be good, whatever, and in we're pulling ourselves out of it, but we still have those off nights sort of deals. In both of those instances, a lot of times when they've given up that many, it's been like, yeah, okay, they've given up that many, but it's not like the other team earned every bit of those goals. That was not the case against the Buffalo Sabres. And for me, the stat that bears this out is that Jakub Dobes was in net for 6 goals against the Buffalo Sabres. According to Money Puck, he still finished the game with a positive goal saved above expected, which means that the Sabres it was expected that the Sabres would score 6 goals on Jakub Dobes, and that they did. So while I'm talking about Dobes, I think a lot of people are nervous about him potentially for Game 7. I think that pulling was a mercy pulling. It was more so, hey, we're not winning this hockey game now. The only thing that can happen from this point on is that Dobes could get hurt. We might as well get him out of there, and that's what they did. Also, to put Fowler into that situation, does it help to be able to say, oh, well, he's played some playoff hockey at this point? I don't think so. I don't think what Dobes or what Fowler experienced in the garbage time moments of that hockey game come out to be anything like playoff experience. But in this game, Montreal, they have a 3-1 lead in the first period. This is the first time in the history of this franchise that they've had a lead, a 2-goal lead, a multi-goal lead in a potential series clinching game, and they've blown it. That's kind of shocking to me. That's just by virtue of this team being around for a long time, that they can still find new ways to be embarrassing from time to time. With that said, I think, they had that lead in the first. They had a 3-1 lead. I think they leave the first with a 3-2 lead because Buffalo gets one towards the end. But that period was even. The scoring chances were pretty close to even. The shot attempts were close to even. High danger chances close to even. So it didn't feel like Montreal really took full advantage of the fact that Alex Lyon was not good. And when Alex Lyon got pulled after the Jake Evans goal, it did not, the Canadiens did not put any pressure on Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. They did none. I think they ended up with like 15 or 16 shots against him for the remainder of that game. It's not good enough. But even with the Canadiens having the lead leaving the first period, I want to go back to the very first shift. because I feel like the last 3 games of this series, the Canadiens' first shift has been awful. And they've been scored on so quickly in all of these games. Even going back to game 1, they got scored on very quickly in game 1. But game 6, the top line is out there to start the game, and they get scored on. And the top line offensively in game 5 had taken a big step forward. They scored their first 5-on-5 goal of the series of the playoffs, their only one to date. Yes, they picked up a bunch of points on the power play, which I don't want to belittle. Like, those are points. You're picking up points. You're helping your team win. Those were 2 crucial power plays the Canadiens got in that game, and they all chipped in and picked up points. The problem is, though, is that when these games start, it does not seem like they're ready to go. It seems like a constant problem with this hockey team this year has been they seem completely shocked that the other team is allowed to respond, that the other team is allowed to bounce back. John Cooper always says the enemy gets a vote. And I think the Canadiens, one of the stumbling blocks this year, and most of it's happened in game because you don't play the same team all the same times, or like, in rapid succession like this. Montreal starts a game strong. They start a first period strong. The second period, the other team's all over them. And they almost seem like completely underwater at that point. And a lot of time, that's their second periods it was their worst period all year. The playoffs are not a microcosm of that, a macrocosm of that, right? They are where we see these adjustments hurting them on a game-to-game basis. So Buffalo gets crushed in game 5, and it seemed like Montreal was like, we're going home. We're going to play in front of the Bell Center crowd. We're going to be feeling it. It's Saturday night, prime time. And they just, from the jump, they were the second best team on the ice. The first period was about even. I'll give them that. The second and third periods were not. And the third period, that the game wasn't over before the third period started. They went into the third period here at 5-3. It's a 2-goal lead. Don't get me wrong, Montreal hasn't had a multi-goal comeback in these playoffs, but that's not over, especially with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in net, a guy that you can beat. And the third period was among their worst. And I don't know how the third period ended up being worse than the second period. I really, I couldn't. At one point I posted, the Canadiens know they need to shoot to come back in this game, right? And then a couple minutes later, the thought came across that was like, the Canadiens know they need to come back in this game, right? The way they were playing was not, it did not match our expectations of a team that's down by a couple goals in a potential series clinching playoff game. It didn't make any sense. They pulled the goalie with about 6.5 minutes to go. They ended up giving up an empty net goal there to Thompson. And then Metza added his first playoff goal. Weird play. Puck just bounced around on a bunch of sticks and went through the net, through Fowler and into the net. I was genuinely shocked by that game in a way that, we talk about the Canadiens' ability to come back from losses in this playoff. They're 5-0 after a loss in these playoffs. This wasn't just any loss. And I know everyone says, oh, it's just one loss. It's, it doesn't matter if you lose by this many or this many, it's still one loss. I think I've said that on this show. And all that's well and good, but headed into a game 7, I think it does hit a little different that you got blown out in game 6 at home. We'll talk about game 7 and what to expect and where the edge lies and who's going to need to step up if you're the Montreal Canadiens and who you need to shut down from the Buffalo Sabres. But boy, there are a lot of lessons to be taken from game 6, and none of them are particularly convenient to learn over the next. They have until this evening, as you're listening to this, to figure out a way to flush that loss and be better from it. Give Lindy Ruff credit. He fully blendered all of his lines, and they were great. The Sabres were great in game 6. The Sabres will have to do something this series that they haven't been able to do yet, which is win consecutive games in order to win this. But If those lines perform the same way that we saw them perform in Game 6, Montreal is going to be in a lot of trouble if their stars can't match. So with that, let's leave that there. When we come back, I want to talk about the Bell Center, a place I've actually been now. I can actually talk about the Bell Center, not as some abstract concept, but as a concrete place that I have been to, and try to figure out, is there any truth to the fact that the Canadiens are having a hard time playing there, and it's because of the environment that has been created. And we'll get into all of that in just a minute here on Locked On Canadiens. The hunt for the Stanley Cup is on, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. On Kalshi, you can trade every single playoff game, every series, the conference finals, and the Stanley Cup final. All right, it's Montreal, it's Buffalo, it's Game 7. If you're feeling Montreal, they're currently trading at about 48%, which means that a $100 trade pays out $189 against the Buffalo Sabres in Game 7. If you want some more thoughts to that, like we've said, Buffalo struggled at home in this series. Montreal has not lost back-to-back games in these playoffs. So that would be a first if they were to lose Game 7. So currently trading as a slight underdog in this series, but again, I think this goes to show you just how close it truly is between these two teams. So on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as probability changes, you can buy in and out of your positions. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. Let's use the code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, Kalshi. Kalshi, trade on anything. Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the right people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, welcome back. Hey, if you've got ad fatigue, if you want to hear Laura and I stop reading these things, go check out the Everyday Club. You'll get an ad-free feed of this show, so every episode ad-free. Plus, you get access to a Discord server with me and Laura and other listeners of the show who have signed up for the Everyday Club, so we can hang out and chat about the news, talk about games. It's a lot of fun. Come hang out with us. LockedOnCanadiens.supercast.com to get started. There's a link in the show notes to get you headed in the right direction. All right. The Canadiens, to this point, have played 6 games at home. They have won 2 of them. Funny enough, they've won. They've won Game 3 in both series. That's the only home game that they've won in both the Tampa series and the Buffalo series. And I think a lot of that is they're in both series. They took a split out of the first 2. You're headed back to what is a hostile environment for the other team. It's a great opportunity for Montreal to get a jump on the other team. And both times they have. They've left Game 3 of both series with a 2-1 series lead. I've talked about Game 4 on this podcast recently, where it seems like the Canadiens have a really hard time manufacturing the same level of urgency in Game 4. That goes back now 3 series. We can go back to the Washington series last spring and say, what's going on here? Like, why are the Canadiens having a hard time figuring out Game 4? I wonder how much of it is. A lot of people are immediately going to, well, the Bell Center is loud and the fans are crazy, that the pressure is getting to the guys who play there. And I just cannot find myself agreeing with that line of thinking. that it somehow energizes the other team, that you can find me agreeing with. Because people who are hockey nuts, which are a lot of these athletes are, who love this sort of atmosphere to play in, they love to take it away. The PK Subban quote from 2014 against Boston. I can't wait to go into that barn and hear that crowd and hear that noise and take it all away from them. That's how a lot of players feel coming into the Bell Center in December, right? It doesn't even need to have the juice of a playoff game. And guys are feeling that coming into the Bell Center. So a lot of people seem to think that this is the Canadiens crumbling under the pressure of playing at home. I don't buy that for a second. What I do think is that it's a double-edged sword for the Canadiens, in that other players, other teams that come into Montreal, they love to play in that environment too. Now, none of them want to, for a very long time, and I'm hoping this is starting to shift, none of them want to play here full time because of the pressure, no doubt. But that's more of the press and more of the fan pressure, not necessarily in the arena. It's just the pressure of playing in that market. I imagine that, like, you know, the players who you know, are going through slumps and whatever, or are struggling in some capacity, they come to the Bell Center, and it's not like they are like, oh, I can't play here because it's too chaotic and it's too loud here. I can't find myself to agree with that mentality. What I find astounding, though, is just like in games, like I'll just talk about Game 6 again. They have Larry Robinson bring the torch out. Great pick for the torch. That's an all-time franchise legend. That's a great selection for that moment. And in that moment, it seems like the Bell Center is going to will this team to a win. And then Buffalo scores on their first shift. The crowd is sort of stunned by it. But then Montreal brings them back. And that third Evans goal, that places pandemonium. What happened next was on the team, man. That was not on the Bell Center. That was not on the crowd. That was not on anything else that happened other than the Montreal Canadiens hockey team took their foot off the gas and stopped playing with any level of urgency to their game. That's what happened in that hockey game. So I find it really fascinating that the crowd is being brought in as like a reason this team can't win at home. You know what it is to me, and I say this knowing full well my co-host is at least partially believes in this mentality of the olaying, right? We've argued a lot about when is and isn't the right time to start olaying. I think that's the same kind of mentality, that it's somehow on the Canadiens fan base to bring a level of intensity that matches the playoff moment, but don't be too much because that puts too much pressure on the team on the ice. That's not how this works. Like, the Canadiens fans are Canadiens fans, and it's not a dimmer switch. At least you hope it's not. Like, when you're bad in this city, you should know that you're playing poorly, and the crowd will jump in accordingly. But when you're playing well, there's no better market to play in. If anything, this season should illuminate to everybody that the Bell Center is the best place to play hockey in the prime of your career, when things are going really well. They started doing the wave this year. Like, this is a time to be at the Bell Center. I know tickets are going to be expensive they always were expensive, but it's about to balloon, I would imagine. But this is the time for that. I think we have to come to the conclusion here. At least this is where I'm coming to the conclusion. Feel free to disagree with me. We all have our own. We're essentially arguing against like different forms of magic is essentially what's happening. But I just think that we have to remind ourselves that this team is still very young. and they're still learning how to win in these moments. Like game 6 in the last series against Tampa. No, they didn't win, but it was one of the closest hockey games played all year. Like not between the Canadian, not just a Canadiens game, hockey game. It was one of the closest hockey games ever played in the NHL or in the Olympics this year, quite honestly. Like it's right up there for me with Canada and US in the Olympic gold medal game. It's right there for me. So I have a hard time being like the crowd is is too much and this team can't handle it. Because if that's the case, scrap this whole thing. If that's the case, like they can't they can't have a hockey team here, or at least this hockey team can't do it. So you might as well just start another rebuild. If that's what you believe, I can't honestly think you believe that. I just can't. They're still such a young team. They're learning how to win. In a few years, we'll look back on this argument and we'll remember how stupid it sounded. Because in a few years, when this team has added and they're at the level of power that they're supposed to be at, and they're crushing it at home in the playoffs, we're going to look back at this differently. But for right now, being a great road team in the playoffs is not a bad place to be, especially when you're headed into Game 7 in hostile Buffalo, New York. And with that, we'll throw it to our third and final segment here. We'll talk about Game 7. We'll talk about what the Canadiens need to be able to do. We'll talk about who they need to watch out for on the Buffalo Sabres. And we'll get into that in just a minute here on Locked On Canadiens. Missed calls and slow follow-ups are silent killers for businesses. That's how money gets left on the table without people even realizing it. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the business communication system built so you never miss a call. Quo helps businesses keep every conversation organized by letting your entire team manage calls and texts from one shared number. No more dropped messages, missed opportunities, or disconnected communication. It's designed for how modern businesses actually operate. The things I love the most, everything lives in one clean thread, calls, texts, voicemails. So everything's contained and the whole team sees that whole conversation. So nothing falls through the cracks. And the AI summaries save serious time by logging calls and highlighting the next steps automatically. It just makes your businesses feel more organized and responsive. Money is on the line, so always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnhl. That's quo.com/lockedonnhl. All right, everyone, we're back. Let's talk about it. Game 7. First of all, I want to take a bird's eye view of this whole thing. With the Canadiens being the version of the Canadiens we're seeing, playing in another Game 7, win or lose, is a good thing, right? We didn't expect them to win a Stanley Cup this year. We kind of didn't even really expect them to win a playoff round, let alone win a Game 7 in a playoff round and then be in another one in the following round. So in the grand scheme of things, this young group being in 2 Game 7s in consecutive rounds will only make this team better in the long run. To have that experience. And speaking of that experience, you look across the ice at the Buffalo Sabres, there's not a lot of it. There's not a lot of guys there who have played in Game 7s. I think Logan Stanley played in the one last year for Winnipeg. I would imagine. I think he was in that. He was at least playing for the Winnipeg Jets at that point. Maybe Jason Zucker's got one. Maybe Shen has one. But the goaltenders don't have them. And most of the core of this hockey team does not have a Game 7 by virtue of them being on the Buffalo Sabres. So if you want an edge there of what a Game 7 feels like, that is it. But you can also look just a couple weeks ago where the Tampa Bay Lightning had all the Game 7 experience. And these youthful Montreal Canadiens who had none, essentially none, although you had Brendan Gallagher, you had Phil Deneau, you had Jake Evans, you had Josh Anderson. Like there was a handful of guys who have played in those kinds of situations. But Montreal was outmatched generally in the veteran standpoint of that matchup. So you can look at it as an edge for the Canadiens, but you can also look at it like Montreal last year. I mean, although you can also look at Suzuki and Caulfield, right? Those guys also played in it. Like they had a little bit more juice to that lemon than the Buffalo Sabres do this time around. But I think we'd all be deluding ourselves to say Montreal played a great game in their last Game 7 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They got 9 shots on goal, and they needed Jakub Dobes to be an all-world goaltender, which he was in that moment. Can Jakub Dobes do that again? I'm certainly not going to bet against him. But given how the last couple games of this series have gone, I am a little worried that the Canadiens are going to need to put more goals in the net. And they're going to need to get off to a good start, which has been a struggle for them in these playoffs. They really haven't been able to do that against, I shouldn't even say these playoffs, against the Buffalo Sabres. I will say, I think special teams are going to be not a moot point in this hockey game, but this is going to be each team might get one power play sort of evening. And Montreal's power play looks like it's cooking. I think they've unlocked something there because everyone seems like they want to be able to shoot the puck a little bit more. And then you look across the ice and you see the Buffalo Sabres have also got something going with their power play. I saw some people getting upset because that the Sabres got a late game power play, which they ended up scoring on. And they started that power play with their top unit on the ice. And like, I thought it was silly when Alain Vigneault got upset about that in the bubble with Montreal. I think it's silly to get upset about it now. If you don't want your opponent to ice their top power play unit in the dying minutes of a blowout hockey game, you can do one of two things. You cannot get blown out in a hockey game, and you cannot take a penalty in the late stages of a blown out hockey game. All that's whining. I don't handle that well. If you're asking me for a prediction, I don't know how to provide one. Every game in this series has been more unpredictable than the last. Every shift seems like it's more unpredictable than the last. I fear that we are headed for an unknown of a hockey game tonight, where any number of things could happen and we could go, yeah, that makes sense. Montreal Canadiens blowout win. Yeah, that makes sense. Buffalo Sabres blowout win. Yeah, we could have seen that coming. It happened 2 days ago. I only wish that the Canadiens, the young players, play an important role in this. And to Robert Rice, our buddy Robert Rice, he reached out to ask about, the veterans being able to step in moments where this team needs a lift and they need somebody to stop the bleeding a little bit. It would be nice if we could get some of those moments from the Josh Andersons. Why aren't they able to do it? I don't know. In fact, Josh Anderson made things worse. He had the turnover in the third period that he then immediately took a slashing penalty to try to come back into the play, and they gave Quinn scored his second goal of the game to make it 6-3. It ended Dobish's night. Like, it seems like the inverse is happening, where the veterans on this roster are not helping to stop the bleeding in these moments. But I don't think that that's going to be the reason this game is won or lost. If you're the Montreal Canadiens, you have to find an answer for Zach Benson. You have to find an answer for Rasmus Dahlin. And from there, I think that's your recipe for success. If you can keep those two guys off the board, you'll be okay. But the first line needs to start on time. The first line actually shouldn't even start the hockey game. I'd put any other line out there that start the game. They've proven to be incapable of handling that moment. I'm not saying they're a bad line. I'm not saying they're bad hockey players. I'm saying that moment is not a fit for those guys at this point in time. I would not start them. I would much sooner start the Anderson, Danault, Texier line. I would much sooner start the Evans, Demidov, Newhook line. I don't know that I'd go so far as to say I'd start Veleno, Doc Bolduc, but to each their own. But I would start those two lines I just mentioned over the first line at this point, because they've started games and they get scored on very quickly. You cannot afford to be behind the 8 ball. I think Game 7's the winner, the team who scores first goes on to win about 70% of the time. You can't be behind the 8 ball like that in this hockey game. As much as this series has been back and forth and scoring that first goal almost seems like it doesn't matter, don't tempt fate. Don't get behind the 8 ball like that. Put your best lineup out there to start a hockey game and try. Like if you're the Deneau, Texier, Anderson line, your job is to get the puck off the faceoff, work it down low, get the goalie to get a stoppage, and get the first line out there for the next shift. That's your job. The first line hasn't been able to handle that first shift, all of the intensity that comes along with it. Stop putting them in that situation. I know Marty loves them. We all love them. That line is one of the reasons the Canadiens are here. So they need, I just think they need to put them in a better place to succeed. I think my final thought on this is I won't be on the show on Monday. Laura will be back. I'm traveling. I will be away. I'll be watching the game from a hotel room. I hope this is not the last we get to see of them. I genuinely, as much as it's nice that they're in this game 7 and they're going to learn bunches from it anyway, to end a series this way would be a very sour taste to end a very, very fun and successful season for this hockey team. And I'm just very much hoping that that's not where we're headed. So Laura will be back with you to break down that hockey game and hopefully set up the next series against the Carolina Hurricanes. But if not, she'll have to wait for me to get back for us to eulogize this hockey team. That's where we're at. That's what a game 7 is. I know people don't want to hear it one way or the other, but by this time tomorrow, we'll know the Canadiens' fate. We'll know whether or not they're headed home or if they're headed to Raleigh. And we'll see what happens after that. So thank you for tuning in, for making us your first listen of the day, for subscribing wherever you get your podcast, doing that supports us here on the show and ensures you don't miss an episode. If you want to continue to support us, and if you're already an everydayer, go join the Everydayer Club. It's a way for you to subscribe so that you can get ad-free episodes of this show, plus access to a Discord chat with me and Laura and the other listeners of the show. So come hang out. And it supports us directly. We get to take a little slice of that. So we thank you. Those of you who are already part of that, thank you. And for those of you who are considering it, we hope you do. You can find the show everywhere we're posting things at Locked On Canadiens, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. We are lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. That's the best way to get in contact with us. If you'd like to send us an email, we do a mailbag every week. So send in those questions, send in anything you guys have thoughts on. We love hearing from you. So lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. You can find my co-host Laura at The Actor Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in. Enjoy it. It's hockey. It's game 7. It's the Montreal Canadiens. We'll see you on the other side. Enjoy, guys.